Instead of taking each of Donald Trump's outbursts in isolation and at face value, if we were to look at patterns of extreme behaviour on the advice and expertise of professionals, we can get a sense of his climb to the top and where it's headed through the lens of the Dark Triad. His psychopathy allows for the needless deaths of American citizens through negligence, while he knew...
This is more deadly. This is 5 per... this is 5% versus 1% and less than 1%. So this is deadly stuff.
His lack of empathy that not only allows but endorses children to be separated from their parents at the Mexican border, a move that former Republican First Lady Laura Bush condemned as shameful and immoral. His Machiavellianism shows up with his deceptive practices in his private education con, while he avoids the taxman, that's basically you as taxpayers, as well as stiffing his contractors, also you as workers. His Machiavellianism also showed up 4 years ago when he cheated his way to election victory through the use of Cambridge Analytica's personal data mining and manipulative advertising practices. But it'll all be okay, as long as Americans can pretend to save face, hiding behind Trump's narcissism, which attempts to distract us into thinking he's one big harmless joker. The longer we allow him to get away with behaviours like dog whistling to his brown shirts to
stand back and stand by,
the more likely he'll believe that he can get away with attacks on his own citizens, governors,
and then I guess they said she was threatened, right? She was threatened. And she blamed me.
and possibly even presidential candidates.
This is when somebody's the president of the United States, the authority is total.
Basically, I just want to hear the words,
I would like to promise and pledge to all of my voters and supporters and to all of the people of the United States that I will totally accept the results of this great and historic presidential election
without the
if I win.
Fascists, beware of Donald Trump and the Dark Triad. In an earlier video of mine, I called out Trump's pathological behaviours. To back up this claim in more detail, let's first listen to the experts.
My name is John Gartner. I'm a psychologist. I taught in the Department of Psychiatry at Johns Hopkins University for 28 years. I've written some books, and I'm the founder of Duty to Warn, an organization of mental health professionals that believe that Donald Trump should be removed because he's psychologically unfit.
My name is Lance Dotis. I'm a psychiatrist and a psychoanalyst. I've spent most of my research career looking at compulsive and addictive behavior, and I've become interested in the importance of psychology and politics in recent years because of the threat to our country.
My name is Justin Frank, a psychoanalyst and a psychiatrist. I've been in practice in D.C. for about 40 years. Is Donald Trump fit to serve as the president and commander-in-chief? I can answer that with one word: no.
I don't throw labels around at will. I look to evidence and experts. So take a look at this study, which compares Trump's personality with other populist leaders from around the world. According to the judgment of the participating experts, Trump's personality is extremely extroverted, extremely low on agreeableness, extremely low on conscientiousness, extremely neurotic, and also extremely high on narcissism, psychopathy, and Machiavellianism. The only trait where he was rated as average was openness. Trump came out as having the lowest scores of all on agreeableness, conscientiousness, and emotional stability, and the highest scores for narcissism and Machiavellianism. On extroversion, he was only outscored by Vladimir Zhirinovsky of Russia, and on trait psychopathy only by Arlene Foster of Northern Ireland and Nikolai Gruevsky of Macedonia. The three traits we'll be looking at today are collectively known as the Dark Triad.
The Dark Triad is a relatively new concept in the world of psychology. The term was created in 2012 by a pair of psychologists named Paulus and Williams. In their research, these psychologists identified 3 personality traits that were most prominent in dangerous people who were more likely to commit crimes. Like most personality traits, the Dark Triad exists in all people to certain degrees.
You can take the test yourself to see where you fall on the Dark Triad scale by clicking the link in the description below.
Everyone has some Dark Triad qualities. In fact, researchers show that some degrees of Dark Triad indicate a potentially good business leader or a bright person. But the people who are more dark than others are more likely to act in ways that hurt others. So, what are these scary Dark Triad traits?
They are narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy.
Narcissists tend to have a large sense of self, as they feel entitled and superior to those around them.
When Donald Trump scores 3.91 out of 4 in trait narcissism on the Dark Triad test, it is easy to find behavioural examples to highlight the fact. From his ego-gratifying self-named brand, his false sense of superiority.
I'm back because I'm a perfect physical specimen and I'm extremely young.
While in the next moment, he's visibly struggling to breathe.
Maybe come back there.
His narcissism shows when he claims
that China has total respect for Donald Trump and for Donald Trump's very, very large brain.
And when asked about what research or data he uses to make his decisions, he doesn't point to any tangible work, any published data or evidence. He just points to his wig and claims,
The metrics right here. That's my metrics.
He has delusions of grandeur to the point where he doesn't understand his own country's constitution, claiming,
This is when somebody's the president of the United States, the authority is total. And that's the way it's got to be.
The authority is total.
It's total. It's total.
Your
And the
authority is
governors
total.
know that.
So if a
The governors know that.
There's probably an infinite number of examples one could choose from when highlighting Trump's narcissism, but in the end, there's simply no need to look when he admits it himself. In his 2005 book, Master Apprentice, he wrote, "If I get my name in the paper, if people pay attention, that's what matters."
Machiavellianism, on the other hand, tends to be more manipulative and selfish.
Machiavellianism is named after the 16th century diplomat who wrote a book called The Prince, which advises aspiring politicians to rise to the top by any means necessary. Trump displays this trait in both the most mundane ways while he cheats at golf, even against Tiger Woods, to the more meaningful, calculated way he forces anyone he works with to sign a non-disclosure agreement, including the doctors charged with treating him as president. In the same way he cheats at golf, and cheats on his wife, and he cheats on his exams by hiring a friend to sit them for him. He again focuses on his own self-interest and personal gain by cheating on his taxes. He will also inflate his wealth in order to borrow billions to fund business deals, and he lies to deflate his own wealth in order to pay less tax. Trump was ordered to pay a $25 million settlement to those who attended his Trump University in 3 separate lawsuits for, among other claims, deceptive practices. In fact, there's probably one metric that Trump could claim number 1 in: the amount of court cases he's been involved in. The number is an incredible 3,500.
And psychopaths are more insensitive, as they lack empathy for others and act without thinking.
Adding to my earlier video, The Psychopathy of Far-Right Politics, in which I display many of Trump's psychopathic behaviours, his lack of morals allows him to con people into investing or loaning money to him for a business venture. He would naturally run this new business to the ground, soaking up anything of value from it, while paying himself out of the dying company with a golden handshake. Then as the business goes bankrupt, he would challenge his investors to simply sue him, knowing that they no longer had the means or the time to successfully do so, hence the thousands of lawsuits. His callousness would show up in his desire for revenge, even towards those that he claims merely chose not to help him.
Well, there were people that I really helped in business when things were very good in the 1980s and when my company was going good, and they did not lift a finger to help me when I needed it, and there were a couple of them that could have very easily helped me. Now I have the opportunity to do a number on those people, and I will tell you I'm having a lot of fun with the opportunity.
His entitlement knows no bounds, and his sadistic enjoyment at the suffering he's caused, exhibited by his wry smile, is very telling. If this is how he treats those who choose not to help him, how would he treat those that actively expose him?
And now we have some new reporting, out first in the New York Times, of a president so angry that this all got out, he is seemingly longing for the death penalty for the officials in his own administration who cooperated with the whistleblower. Take a listen to the audio obtained by the Los Angeles Times.
Who's the person that gave the whistleblower the information? Because that's close to a spy. You know what we used to do in the old days when we were smart, right? With spies and treason. Right? We used to handle it a little differently than we do now.
This whistleblower in question claimed that the President of the United States is using the power of his office to solicit interference from a foreign country in the 2020 US election. In other words, he claims Trump is doing what comes naturally to him, cheating, on an international scale. So how did someone so demonstrably toxic such as Trump get to the White House? Well, it just so happens that the Dark Triad plays to our primal instincts.
Think about your favorite villain movies and ask yourself, what is it that makes us both hate and love the villains at the same time? These three traits are regularly glamorized in major Hollywood movies, and they also happen to be three things that make men incredibly irresistible. Now, logically, it makes no sense. Why would girls chase after men who are terrible long-term options for them? And why is it that as humans, despite having good in our hearts, we always seem to want to chase after what's bad for us or what we know that we shouldn't have? Now, it's true that these three traits can also be found in females, but they are far more common in men. I used to have this friend, and he seemed to always know exactly what to say to get what he wanted from other people. Many times while hanging out with him, I wanted to punch him in the face for the things that he would do and say to me and other people.
She gets out and she starts asking me all sorts of ridiculous questions, and you know, you could see there was blood coming out of her eyes, blood coming out of her wherever.
Written by a nice reporter. Now the poor guy, you got to see this guy. Oh, I don't know what I said. I don't remember. He's going like, I don't remember. Oh, maybe that's what I said.
But yet, whenever he would call me to meet up, it's like I couldn't say no. He always knew exactly what to say to get me to come hang out with him.
Go ahead, Billy, let's vote.
Now, a few of the things that men who have these traits do are things like peacocking or showing off.
In Trump's case, the only things he can really show off are his favourite toys.
And it's a little bit junky.
Yeah. You know what? This I just got a few weeks ago. This is from the Marine Corps. That's the chair for The Apprentice that I used.
Oh, wow.
These are different things. Tom Brady's Super Bowl helmet.
Wow.
This is Mike Tyson's belt. This is Vince McMahon from the World Wrestling Federation. This is Shaquille O'Neal's shoe.
Oh my God.
Right here, which is a serious shoe.
Is that a real shoe?
That's a real shoe. He took it off after a game and handed it to me.
Oh my God.
I carried it like this.
Yeah, I guess. Because you don't really like germs anyway, do you?
No.
So the question is, why are people drawn to men with these traits? And this occurs for kind of the same reason why we want the villain in our favorite movie and TV shows to lose in the end, while also secretly liking them.
The Dark Triad is able to charm us, to speak to us, and to inspire us by reaching to our primal instincts. But this love-bombing stage doesn't last long. Eventually the lies, the abuse, the manipulation and the negligence is found out and our minds turn to escape. If Trump survives this coming election, his Dark Triad characteristics will exacerbate the current abuse we are all collectively suffering. The working class will continue to be neglected in favour of tax breaks for massive corporations and the billionaires. More needless deaths of our most vulnerable members of the community as the COVID pandemic continues. And while the American government's negligent response to the crisis is continually mishandled through a lack of care, more Americans will needlessly die. We now know that back in February, Trump privately admitted,
It's
Indeed,
it goes through air, Bob. That's always tougher than the touch. You know, the touch, you don't have to touch things, right? But the air, you just breathe the air, and that's how it's passed. And so that's a very tricky one. That's a very delicate one. It's also more deadly than your strenuous flus. You know, people don't realize we lose 25,000, 30,000 people a year here. Who would ever think that, right?
I know. It's
pretty amazing. And then I say, well, is that the same thing? This is more deadly. This is 5 per. You know, this is 5% versus 1% and less than 1%. You know, so this is deadly stuff.
Yet he continually downplayed the virus publicly.
People are pandemicked out. You know that? They're pandemicked out. That's why it's so great what your governor's done. He's opened up your state. You're doing great. We pioneered life. And by the way, you get it. You know, like I say, here I am. I'm here. And now I'm immune. I can jump into this audience and kiss every man and woman. I'm immune. Right? They say.
Of all the deaths due to COVID around the world, 20% of them are American citizens. 220,000 Americans have died of COVID. That's 57 times more than the 3,836 that died in the 9 years of the Iraq War. This headline is unquestionable when it says, Trump will never admit error, and that his lack of self-accountability is deadly.
Is there anybody you'd like to apologize to right now yourself?
No.
No?
Under Trump, America will continue to imprison migrant children into concentration camps and separate them from their families.
The Associated Press detailed conditions inside a Customs and Border Patrol detention center in Clint, Texas, where allegedly 250 infants, children, and teenagers are being held. According to the AP, there's not adequate food, water, or sanitation inside. The report describes teen mothers and other younger kids being asked to care for infants and toddlers on their own, with little or no help from any adults. Warren Binford is one of the lawyers that visited that Texas facility and spoke with the children being held inside. She's a law professor at Willamette University in Oregon. Professor Binford, thank you very much for being here. As I mentioned, you were inside this Texas facility. Can you just give us some sense of what it is you saw inside?
Yes, basically what we saw are dirty children who are malnourished, who are being severely neglected. They are being kept in inhumane conditions. They are essentially being warehoused, as many as 300 children in a cell with almost no adult supervision. We have children caring for other young children. For example, we saw a little boy in diapers, or he had no diapers on. He should have had a diaper on. He was 2 years old, and when I asked why he didn't have diapers on, I was told he didn't need it. He immediately urinated, and he was in the care of another child. Children cannot take care of children, and yet that's how they are trying to run this facility. The children are hardly being fed anything nutritious, and they are being medically neglected. We're seeing a flu outbreak, and we're also seeing a lice infestation. It is we have children sleeping on the floor. It's the worst conditions I've ever witnessed in several years of doing these inspections.
And while we are being asked to speak only to officers, we are not getting the accounts of migrants, of their treatment, of what they are experiencing. And so when these women tell me that they were put into a cell and that their sink was not working, and we tested the sink ourselves and the sink was not working, and they were told to drink out of a toilet bowl, I believed them. I believed these women. I believed the canker sores that I saw in their mouths because they were only allowed to be fed unnutritious food. I believed them when they said they were sleeping on concrete floors for 2 months. I believed them. And what was worse about this, Mr. Chairman, was the fact that there were American flags hanging all over these facilities, that children were being separated from their parents in front of an American flag, that women were being called these names under an American flag. We cannot allow for this.
His complete lack of empathy will prevent him from reuniting these children with their parents. This was his response to the matter.
The United States will not be a migrant camp, and it will not be a refugee holding facility. Won't be. And they could be murderers and thieves and so much else. So we want a safe, country. And it starts with the borders. And that's the way it is.
And now 2 years later, lawyers say they can't find the parents of 545 migrant children separated by Trump. Under a self-confessed paranoid Donald Trump,
you have to be paranoid.
This commander-in-chief has complete authority over the use of America's nuclear weapons. The Dark Triad in Trump only makes the threat of a nuclear war ever more likely, as we see the doomsday clock currently set closer to midnight than it was during the Cold War. If Trump's paranoid finger on the nuclear missile launcher isn't enough to convince you, do you think he would refrain from using the military to attack American citizens at home?
Are you prepared to use the military against U.S. citizens?
Press, we're going. Press, let's go.
Mr. President, are you further advocating countries by using the military?
Press, let's go. Press, let's go.
I wouldn't bet against it, since he's already authorized the use of flashbangs, tear gas and rubber bullets. This was merely so he could do a photo shoot outside a boarded-up church due to lockdown, opposite the White House.
Hey, Bob.
What are your thoughts right now?
White House. We have a great country. That's my thoughts.
He felt that this impromptu photo shoot was so important that it was necessary to use lethal weaponry in order to disperse the peaceful protest and clear a path for him. Trump does not speak for the American people. He has simply used his Dark Triad charm to make voters believe that his presidency benefits them. He speaks in an impoverished language that they can relate to, while telling them that
I know words, I have the best words.
Yet his presidency is only to benefit himself and his rich mates. To the extent that he has interacted with common Americans, it has been as a commercial icon.
He made a statement once that was very striking. I never forgot it because it pretty much defined who he was. When we were in a task force meeting, the president said, maybe this COVID thing is a good thing. I don't like shaking hands with people. I don't have to shake hands with these disgusting people. Those disgusting people are the same people that he claims to care about. These are the people still going to his rallies today who have complete faith in who he is.
He sells them chances to lose money at his casino slot machines. He grants them admission to real estate society through the scam that was Trump University. He offers them armchair viewing of crass demonstrations of cruel power in The Apprentice.
It would be 9 blacks against 9 whites, all highly educated, very smart, strong, beautiful people, right?
Wouldn't that set off a racial war in this country?
See, actually, I don't think it would. I think
Now, it gets worse. When Stern asked about the details, Trump affirmed that while there would be a mix of light-skinned and dark-skinned black contestants, the white team would consist solely of people with blonde hair. Are you kidding me? He was planning a race war-themed reality show and somehow made it more offensive?
While in power, he convinced the masses that the rich would be taxed more.
This is going to cost me a fortune, this thing. Believe me. This is not good for me.
According to a Forbes estimate, Trump would save $11 million annually with this bill, along with all the other massive tax savings for the rest of the billionaire elite.
My old friend, who I could never seem to resist hanging out with, would always say exactly what I wanted to hear, to hook me and so many others. But it was only a matter of time before I could no longer hang out with him. So in other words, he was always suffering from short-term relationships.
The Dark Triad might be unconsciously seductive, but it's past the time for those initially taken in by Trump to realize that, overall, the president's overconfidence, self-absorption, and disrespect for science and scientists appear to have rendered him unprepared and ineffective, as well as dangerous. He appears to have become more aggressive, more reckless, more fearful, more stressed, and more isolated. These recent patterns of behaviour appear to be increasing over the past year. Some people will say that his words and deeds simply demonstrate harmless hyperbole. Others will focus on the events of the day, viewing each event in isolation as a political issue to argue about, perhaps with name-calling and extreme emotions. But those who recognise personality patterns and use personality awareness to predict future behaviour may see this update as a cause for grave concern, whether or not this meets the criteria of a mental disorder. When a Dark Triad wields power, there will be non-stop narcissism.
Darling, you're the most handsome president. I said, First Lady, am I the most handsome president ever? Yes, absolutely. I said, who could top me? Well, she said, well, JFK was good looking, but nothing like you. Nothing like you, darling.
There'll be manipulative Machiavellianism, including cheating his employees out of their pay, cheating his way through thousands of lawsuits and walking out of interviews.
And he was connected with the mafia.
Again, John, maybe you're thick, but when you have a signed contract, you can't in this country just break it. Sometimes we'll sign a deal and the partner isn't as good as we'd like, but that does happen. And by the way, John, I hate to do this, but I do have that big group of people waiting, so I have to leave.
No, hold on. One last question, please, sir.
I have to leave. Thank you.
Okay, all right then.
And then there'll be psychopathy, which Trump seems to be using to normalise the idea of an authoritarian takeover. He started by threatening protesters.
Am I allowed to rip that whistle out of the mouth? I'd rip that. I love the old days. You know what they used to do to guys like that when they were in a place like this? They'd be carried out on a stretcher, folks.
Then attacking them. Now he's riling up his supporters against elected governors who've already been victim of a kidnap plot by his own supporters.
And then I guess they said she was threatened, right? She was threatened. And she blamed me. She blamed me. And our people were the ones that worked with her people. So let's see what happens.
And when asked to condemn white supremacist violence, he actually answers by dog whistling them to prepare.
Do you want to call them? What do you want to call them? Give me a name. Give me a
white
name.
Supremacists and
white like me to condemn?
White supremacists and right
Proud Boys. Stand back and stand by.
Win or lose this election for Trump, anything could follow. He cheated the last election with the help of Cambridge Analytica, as this contract proves, released by whistleblower Brittany Kaiser. And his whole life's mission objective has been to manufacture chaos.
But generally you have to shake things up pretty much in order to do something of consequence.
I predict the Dark Triad will not be leaving the White House without a fight. There's been numerous reports of voter suppression and voter intimidation as Trump Jr. calls on armed guards to watch over ballot boxes. And if all else fails,
I would like to promise and pledge to all of my voters and supporters and to all of the people of the United States that I will totally accept the results of this great and historic presidential election if I win.
Fascists, beware of Donald Trump and the Dark Triad.